They were two young people made for each other.
It was like love at first sight.
They were engaged to be married.
They had hopes of a great future together.
Until a single gunshot shattered everything.
There's a man laying in the street.
He was bleeding from his head.
They told me, and I just screamed.
Had his past finally caught up to him?
He fell in with the wrong crowd.
The fast life is what he was used to.
The risk a lot of times involves death.
Or was it an act of betrayal?
There was some discord in the relationship.
Remember as you were looking for that? It's not the way anything went down.
She was telling somebody.
What he said?
Are you gonna be killed?
November 7th, 2016. It's a Monday night in Jacksonville, Florida, the Sunshine State's biggest city.
Not only is it home to nearly 1 million people, but it also sprawls across 800 square miles.
Jacksonville, in landmass area, is the largest city in the United States.
But Jacksonville also has some very big problems.
Our homicide rate is out the roof. Jacksonville has some lovely parts and then some parts where some people just don't feel the safest.
It's a little after 10 o'clock that evening when a call comes in from one of those parts of town.
Jacksonville 911. There's a man laying out here in the street.
You think he needs an ambulance?
I see him bleeding.
But the driver doesn't intend to stick around and offer help.
I'm not getting out of the car to see if he's okay.
She was worried about whether or not the person who had hurt them was still in the area.
Although when officers arrive at the scene a few minutes later, there's only the man.
They find a black male laying in a pool of blood. He has a gunshot wound to the head. He doesn't have a pulse.
How he'd ended up on the side of the road isn't entirely clear.
There were pieces of shattered glass right beside his body.
They were consistent with automotive safety glass.
So it was either a drive-by shooting or the murder had occurred somewhere else and the body was dropped there.
All the police know for sure is that the victim is 31-year-old Eddie Brown.
They looked in his pockets and they found his identification as well as the keys to a nearby hotel.
But that's all first responders could find.
Jacksonville native Eddie Brown made a name for himself as a young man.
He was a very accomplished athlete. He was a star on a high school basketball team that won the Florida State Championship.
He had a very promising athletic future. So he had these huge hoop dreams. He wanted to go to the NBA or play professionally.
But those dreams were dashed in an instant.
When he was in college, his nephew was killed, and then that caused him to come home. It was like a part of his life shut off.
It might have broken him if he hadn't met Serena Tenney soon after.
I was, I think, 20 when I met him. We was at a club. I was walking past him, and he said, "Excuse me."
That was all it took.
I looked at him, and then I double took it, and the next thing you know, I just went to him.
Hey.
Stop bumping into it.
Don't be.
I remember giving him my number, and it went from there. It was like love at first sight. We was always having fun.
But it was the way that Eddie doted on her daughter from a previous relationship that sealed the deal.
It's like, yeah, he's the one.
Before long, Serena was pregnant with Eddie's child.
He was just so happy.
They soon had a second child as well.
You know how they say most people, when you have kids, they change? 9 times out of 10, it'd be for the worse. No. He was the dad that gave them whatever they wanted. They played to sun up to sundown. He was a family guy. It was fun.
And after 7 years together, Serena and Eddie decided to finally make things official.
He came up behind me in the kitchen, and when I turned around, he slowly went down.
What are you doing?
Will you marry me?
Oh my gosh.
When he asked me, my mouth just dropped. And I was like, oh my God, are you serious? And then I told him yes, and we laughed. I cried.
But now, just a few months after the engagement, first responders are scrambling to save Eddie's life.
He was discovered on the side of the road with a gunshot wound to the head.
He didn't have a pulse.
Despite that, the EMTs don't declare him dead at the scene.
They put him on a gurney and started chest compressions.
They do take him to the hospital.
By then, detectives are on the scene.
Pulled up on the body, got some blood over there, pulled a wallet out of his pocket. Eddie Brown, he's got some priors.
When police ran Eddie's name through the database, they found he had a lengthy rap sheet.
This may have been drug-related.
After a tragedy ended his dreams of stardom, Eddie Brown found love and fulfillment with his fiancée, Serena Tenney.
Will you marry me?
They had hopes of a great future together.
But now, EMTs have rushed Eddie to the hospital, his life hanging in the balance.
He has a gunshot wound to the head. He was found discarded on the side of the road like trash.
Detectives suspect the shooting was drug-related.
He had some drug history in his past.
The crime scene also offers detectives some possible clues.
They did have the shattered glass that they saw around him. It indicated that he was shot inside of a vehicle and pulled or pushed out of the vehicle.
Detectives also have the motel key card that first responders found in Eddie's pocket.
At that point, we went straight to the motel.
Talking to the hotel manager, they determined that he had been staying there for a few weeks.
Hi, good evening. Hey there.
Hoping it could reveal the shooter's identity, detectives also asked for copies of the motel's security video.
I can put that on a thumb drive for you. That would be great. Right. We appreciate it.
After securing the footage, the detectives head to the hospital to check on the victim.
By then, Eddie's fiance learned of the shooting.
It was 2:48 in the morning. I'm like, who is this? Can I speak to Eddie? She said, do Eddie have any living family? And I'm like, why? What's going on? And she was like, I need you to contact his family and get to the hospital now.
Serena called Eddie's parents and then raced to the hospital.
When she gets there, the doctor is waiting.
Where's Eddie? Where's Eddie? I got a phone call. Where?
And they said, I'm sorry, Eddie didn't make it. And I just freaked out. I lost it.
Serena is still trying to pull herself together when the detectives arrive at the hospital.
Serena?
Yes.
I'm the detective. I know this is tough.
I told her this case would not be a cold case, and I meant that.
She made it clear to investigators that he was a very important part of her life.
However, she also admits that Eddie was no angel.
Serena told police that he had been selling drugs to help with family expenses.
I told him I don't condone it, what you're doing.
Despite that, Eddie didn't stop.
It's fast, quick money, and it's hard to want to go back to a normal job and get a normal paycheck.
Still, Serena says she yearned for a normal life.
I said, that's not the life that I want for me or my kids.
That's why I called off the engagement and he moved out.
Which explained what he was doing at the motel.
Although according to Serena, Eddie had recently started having second thoughts.
He told me that he was gonna leave everything alone. He was like, I got stuff to take care of, but I'm gonna come home.
It kind of sounded like Eddie wanted to make one last big score before calling it quits.
Had it ended up costing Eddie his life?
And any idea of who could have done this to him?
No.
Do you know any of the names of the guys he did business with?
No. I didn't want any part of it.
Thank you for your time.
Or is it possible Serena knew more about Eddie's death than she was letting on?
There was some discord in the relationship that may provide a motive.
Detectives hope the answer lies somewhere in the surveillance footage from Eddie's motel.
Yes, Scott?
As investigators scrub through the footage from the night Eddie died, they notice a white vehicle pull into a parking spot just before 10 p.m., just minutes before he was shot and killed.
On the video, a woman gets out of the SUV.
She walked up to Eddie Brown's motel room. He opened the door to let her in.
Serena was definitely not the woman that they had saw on the surveillance video.
Then, while Eddie and the mystery woman are inside his room, a man gets out of the same SUV and walks around the motel, out of sight.
You could tell something was going on because he didn't stay inside the vehicle.
A few minutes later, Eddie and the mystery woman leave his motel room and get into the SUV.
She got inside the front driver's seat, and Eddie Brown walked around to the front passenger seat.
Then, as the mystery woman is pulling out of the parking space, the man who'd gotten out of the car suddenly reappears.
She stopped, got out of the vehicle, gave him a hug as though she just saw him, even though they had pulled up to the motel room together. And he got inside of the back passenger seat, and then they drove away.
The 911 call reporting Eddie shot on the side of the road came in just a few minutes later.
The detectives suspected he died inside that white SUV.
But who were the mystery woman and her passenger?
It was impossible to make out the license plate on the surveillance video.
Hoping Eddie may have been in contact with a woman prior to their meetup, the detectives subpoena his phone records.
They discover he received a phone call shortly before he was found dead.
Police then tracked that phone number to a person named Angel Hernandez.
When the detectives bring Angel in for questioning, he admits that he knows Eddie.
He knows him by the nickname of Brick.
But he says he's not the one that called Brick from his phone that night.
According to Angel, at 9:30 p.m., a woman he only knows as Shayla knocked on his door.
He knew Shayla from the street. She would occasionally come over and ask to use his phone.
And according to Angel, Shayla had someone with her.
Can I borrow your phone?
Can you describe him best you can? Black male, short hair, not stalking anything, average build.
There you go.
It sounded like the man from the video.
Angel says he'd let Shayla borrow his phone.
Eddie, we need to talk.
He couldn't hear everything that they were talking about.
But what he heard sounded urgent.
I get the sense that there was a worry.
In fact, it sounded like Eddie already knew what was going to happen.
Shayla, you're gonna get me killed.
Detectives investigating Eddie Brown's murder have a possible lead on the mystery woman who came to his motel room shortly before he was shot and dumped on the street a few blocks away.
His phone records have showed that the call he had received before he died was from a male that they hadn't been aware of before. His name was Angel.
But when police tracked down Angel, he swore he didn't make that call.
Hey, Shayla?
He says a woman named Shayla showed up at his door and asked if she could use his phone. She made a phone call to the victim, Eddie Brown.
And according to Angel, it was a tense conversation.
I can hear through the earpiece Cindy and Maud on the other side.
Angel said he overheard Eddie on the phone call say, "You're going to get me killed."
He said that to her?
That's what I said.
Obviously, there's a motive there that the investigators need to discover.
Could you tell whether she was trying to meet up with him later?
Definitely the conversation was to meet up.
When detectives show Angel images from the motel surveillance videos, it appears that is exactly what happened.
Angel confirms that the woman in the video is Shayla, and the man who got in the back seat is the man she was with.
But that's about all that Angel knew.
You're free to go. Appreciate you coming in.
With Angel unable to identify the woman further, the detectives turned back to Eddie's fiancée, Serena.
They showed me a picture.
She didn't recognize the man, but she knew the woman.
That's not her real name.
She said, "You sure that's not Shayla?" I said, "No. Her real name is Felicia." And she did dates off a Backpage and a little street walking.
She was also a customer of Eddie's.
She'll go do dates to bring back more money to Eddie just to get her high.
But rumor has it, Felicia would sometimes skip the middleman.
She would trade Eddie's sex for drugs.
She got drunk and she told me.
Serena admits that's what really caused the split between her and Eddie.
When she told me, I went in the house and I packed this stuff and I had to buy the front door.
That's the reason he was living in a motel. But recently he said...
But then, just before his murder, Eddie had told Serena he and Felicia were through.
He was like, "I just wanted to let you know I don't want nothing to do with her. I just want my family back."
If what Serena is telling them is true, did she just give Felicia a motive?
Police did wonder whether or not she may have been jealous of the fact that Eddie was going back to Serena.
5 days after the murder, detectives track Felicia down and start asking her questions about Eddie.
What happened earlier this week? That don't have nothing to do with that, man.
She told police that she had heard about his death on the news and that she was heartbroken.
And even though they were no longer involved, they were still good friends. They stayed in contact.
She also admits to seeing him the evening of the murder.
She wanted to buy some weed from him.
You want to be honest, that's what I went for.
She tells detectives on the night of November 7th she borrowed a car from her friend named Pop.
Felicia says that Pop had also asked her to give a ride to a friend of his, a man she only knew as BT.
She did agree to give him a ride, but she told him that she had to run some errands first.
From Pop's place, they drove over to Angel Hernandez's house so that she could call Eddie. He told her to come by the hotel to buy some weed.
Then you went over there to the hotel? Yeah.
She said when she got to the motel, BT told her that he would just walk the rest of the way.
Only be a minute. Suit yourself.
Felicia says she'd left BT in the car and gone to Eddie's door.
But while she was inside, Eddie made her an offer.
You want me to take me to get something to eat?
But she says that as they were leaving, BT had suddenly reappeared.
What's up?
Walking.
Change my mind, man.
She told him that was fine, but that Eddie wanted to take her out for dinner first.
So BT got back in the car and they all headed out to dinner.
But according to Felicia, they didn't get far.
She said while they were driving to the restaurant, BT then gets a call from Pop.
Hey, this Pop, he say he need a ride.
Yeah, we can go and pick him up over there somewhere off a highway.
And by the time they got Pop, she felt like it was too late to go out to eat.
Felicia says she then drove herself home and gave the keys to the SUV to Pop.
Pop then got behind the wheel, and then the three men drove off together.
According to Felicia, that's the last time she saw Eddie.
Last time I saw him, he was alive. Leaving.
And the conversation Angel overheard, the one where Eddie supposedly said Felicia was going to get him killed?
According to her, it never happened.
That's not the way anything went down.
And she swears she didn't have anything to do with Eddie's murder.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful. But for someone to even come at me like I did anything to him, no.
Detectives aren't quite ready to believe her. But before they lean on her any harder, they want to track down the man she knows only as BT.
It seemed likely that he had something to do with Eddie's death.
But before they can begin searching for him, they get a call from Angel Hernandez.
He told them that he had heard some talk from the streets.
He let them know Felicia had allegedly lent Eddie $500.
The problem is, she didn't have $500 to lend.
500?
She had stolen that $500 from her sugar daddy, a drug dealer by the name of Millie.
Was that why Eddie said she was going to get him killed?
Informant Angel Hernandez has contacted detectives investigating Eddie Brown's murder with a lead on the possible motive behind the crime.
Felicia had allegedly lent Eddie $500.
The problem is, she didn't have $500 to lend. She had stolen the $500 from a local drug dealer named Millie, or as she liked to call him, her sugar daddy.
Could that explain how Eddie ended up dead on the side of the road?
Allegedly, when Millie found out she had stolen the money, he became furious.
This is word on the streets, you know what I'm saying?
It would not be uncommon for a drug dealer to react to somebody that owed him money with violence.
Detectives immediately haul Millie in for an interview.
Need to ask you a few questions.
They make it clear that they're not there to discuss his drug activity.
They assure him they just want to talk to you about Eddie's homicide.
He denied knowing anything about the murder.
But he doesn't deny everything.
Millie said, I knew about the $500.
Okay, so that money is yours.
He confirms to police that she did steal $500 from him.
I'm just guessing here. Maybe you wanted him dead because you guys had a beef.
But he denies any involvement in the murder, and he denies having any issue with Eddie.
I mean, I'm not with no beef and no.
All he wanted was his money.
Millie says he told her she better pay him back, and she better do it soon.
Was that why Felicia had gone to see Eddie that night?
She had the motivation to recover that money no matter what.
In addition to a possible motive, Millie also knew Lisa's likely accomplice.
BT is 26-year-old Blair Terry, and Pop's real name is Jason Stevens.
He also provides police with the address of where they can find Jason Stevens. They call it a trap house, and he told me exactly where it was located.
Is he telling the truth about any of it?
He knows the more helpful I am towards them, the less they're going to focus on me as a suspect.
The detectives weren't entirely sure that Millie was telling them everything that he knew.
But at the end of the interview, they have no choice but to let him go.
We didn't have anything to hold him on.
Then they follow up on his tip on where to find Jason.
We drive by that house numerous times, and we found a white SUV on the side of the road.
It was a match for the SUV in the motel video.
So I thought, wow, this is it. This has got to be the car.
Closer examination all but confirms it.
Look at this.
The passenger side window has recently been replaced And the workmanship was very shoddy.
Broken glass all over the seat.
They call out their crime scene investigators to come and do a full forensic investigation.
Let's go talk to him.
Yeah.
Then the detectives locate Jason inside the house and bring him in for questioning.
He did admit to the fact he loaned the vehicle out to Felisa Lapano.
You regularly let people use that vehicle?
Yes.
Okay, in exchange for money?
Mm-hmm.
She paid him $100 to borrow the vehicle.
Okay. Who was with her?
BT.
But that's where the similarities in Felicia and Jason's stories end.
Jason denied that he ever called BT to come pick him up.
He says he was at home the whole night.
He says he hadn't seen them from the time they picked up his car until the following morning.
When she gave you back the keys, did anything seem off or strange about her or the way she was acting?
No, not really.
But Jason says that when he went to drive the car an hour or so later, he was in for a shock.
The passenger side door window was shattered.
Broken out completely?
Completely.
They didn't tell him about it. They just dropped the car off.
Jason said he was furious. He wanted to know what happened to his car.
Jason says he'd reached out to BT for an explanation.
He gave me the answer that it was either him or me.
What are you even talking about?
I asked him, who is him?
Brick, man. It was Brick.
Brick was Eddie's street name that he was known by as a drug dealer.
According to Jason Stevens, a man named Blair Terry had all but confessed to the murder of Eddie Brown.
He basically stated it was either him or me.
Which suggested that Blair was the one who shot Eddie.
As he's telling you these things, are you asking any more questions?
No, not really. Now I don't even want to know no more.
BT did at least agree to pay for the window he shot out of Jason's SUV.
So he called a glass company, had the window repaired.
For the moment, detectives aren't sure that Jason is telling them the whole truth.
Police said that Jason called them later that night, asking them to pick him up, which he denies.
But as soon as CSI start examining Jason's SUV, there is little doubt they've uncovered the crime scene.
When you open the door, you can hear the glass inside the door frame. You could hear the glass shake.
Inside, other than a few scattered shards of glass, the car appears relatively clean.
But once we processed the vehicle with the black light stuff, you could see there was blood all over that front seat. And the seat belt.
In the back seat, the detectives find more evidence of the shooting.
We found a .40 caliber shell casing underneath the floor mat in the back seat.
Which would be consistent with where BT was sitting on the video.
That was also consistent with Jason's story.
This solidifies the direction of their investigation and seriously looking at BT as the person who pulled the trigger.
Then, after sending blood samples from the SUV to the crime lab for testing, detectives bring Blair Terry in for questioning.
They started by getting him to admit that he knows Shayla.
Everybody around knew the white girl with the red hair as Shayla.
How long have you known her?
I've known her from just like the spurts you see in the here and see her there.
Then the detectives move on to the night of November 7th, the night of Eddie's murder.
He tells them they had been hanging out at a friend's place.
You don't live there though, right? You just hang out there, or you just happen to
No,
be
I
there?
happened to just be there actually.
She mentioned she was going to borrow the car, so he asked her if she could give him a ride.
BT says that Felicia borrowed Jason's SUV and gave him a lift, but she made a few stops along the way.
The first stop was this guy's house that he didn't know. She told him that she needed to make a phone call.
This, of course, was that phone call that Angel Hernandez overheard.
She was telling something like I was talking to him.
Yeah. What was she talking about?
I don't know. I wasn't focused on our conversation.
From there, they drove to a motel and she told him to wait in the car while she went inside to talk to someone.
Only be a minute.
BT says he sat in the car for a while, but he eventually grew impatient.
She was taking forever, and I'm like, well, okay, what's going on? So I got out of the car.
He wandered around the parking lot for a bit until he saw Felicia driving off.
This was all confirmed by the surveillance video.
When you got back in the car, there was another back seat in the front seat.
Yeah, that kind of freaked me out. I didn't know what the ex was.
Yeah, who did she say it was?
I don't know. She was like his ex. She didn't say no name.
He said that he never knew Eddie's name.
In fact, he claims they were only in the car together for a few minutes.
He claimed that he was dropped off at a local gas station.
Blair Terry said that he was dropped off while the victim was still sitting in the front seat.
And Felicia's claim that they made a detour to pick up Jason Stevens, aka Pop.
I don't even know Pop being around.
He says Pop was never with them in the car.
So you don't know anything about the window. She never mentioned anything to you about anything happening in that car?
No, ma'am.
He said he didn't know what the detectives were talking about.
Okay, well, someone was shot and killed in that. Someone was shot and killed.
What?
Yeah. Someone was shot and killed in that car.
That's why I'm here.
At that point, BT decides to stop the interview.
I want to talk to a lawyer or something like that because I don't know what's going on right now.
That's what Blair Terry claims. But when the detectives follow up on his alibi, they find reason to doubt him.
They went to that gas station and looked for the surveillance.
Nowhere that evening at all was there any evidence of the white car or of BT being anywhere near that gas station.
It's proof that Blair was lying to them.
But it takes the test results from Pop's SUV to provide definite proof of where the murder occurred.
The DNA came back from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Biology Department, and that blood was a perfect match to the blood of Eddie Brown.
Once the test results are in, the detectives take both Felicia and Blair Terry into custody.
They had a probable cause to arrest both of them for the murder.
It's news Eddie's fiancée has been waiting to hear for weeks.
The lead detective called me January 15, 2017. She said, Miss Tanny? I said, yes, ma'am. She said they was arrested for second-degree murder. I was happy. I was overjoyed.
But will her happiness prove premature?
The next challenge is going to be proving who pulled the trigger. I don't want to hear another word from you.
3 years before it happened, Eddie dreamed his death. It was him, little short Caucasian girl, walking, and some dude that he'd never seen before came up and shot him. And it was so real to him. The only difference in his dream was they wasn't walking, they was in a car. That's the only difference. Same street, same street. You get warnings before you get destruction, but he ignored it because that fast life, that's what he got used to.
Police have placed both Felicia Lapano and Blair Terry under arrest for the murder of Eddie Brown.
While both were charged with murder, detectives are convinced that Blair Terry pulled the trigger.
The full autopsy on Eddie Brown's body determines that the shot was fired from behind and to the left of the victim.
Which was consistent with where BT was seated in the video just prior to the murder.
Will it be enough to convince a jury?
One of the first tactics they're going to use is to point the fingers at each other to try to create reasonable doubt.
Unsure they can secure a conviction, the prosecutors approach Felicia's lawyers with an offer.
She will be allowed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder.
We needed her testimony to nail Blair Terry as the shooter.
But when it comes to sentencing, there's no guarantee.
In return for her testimony, her sentencing would be delayed until after BT's trial.
The prosecutors may have turned Felicia against him, but Blair Terry appears confident when he goes on trial for Eddie's murder.
It was intense. When he come out, we're already sitting out there, and he would just stare me in my face with a smirk on his face.
According to the prosecution, it was the look of a killer.
The prosecutors paint a picture, and they were able to weave all the elements together. BT's background and his criminal history and his violence.
Then, to make the picture complete, the prosecutors put Felicia on the stand.
She testified in the murder trial about what happened that evening. Felicia Lopano made that phone call to Eddie Brown's phone, and moments later, she pulls up to the motel with Blair Terry.
She says she went to the motel to see Eddie to try to get back the money, and she took Blair Terry as backup just in case Eddie didn't want to pay her back.
Felicia says she and Eddie talked things out in the motel room.
Eddie, you gotta give me that money back.
You should have told me it was Millie's money.
That's why Eddie said to her, "You're going to get me killed."
It doesn't matter. You can get the money, right?
I guess. It'll take a minute, though.
Then they'd left Eddie's motel room to get something to eat.
But in the car, she and Eddie started to argue.
Down! I can't believe you did this to me! I'm sorry!
Bro, don't talk to her like that.
Blair took exception to the way Eddie was talking to her.
But according to Felicia's testimony, what Blair did next caught her totally by surprise.
Blair Terry ended up shooting him in the back of the head.
What'd you do that for?
She said she had no idea what Blair Terry was going to do to Eddie Brown, and she did not know that Blair Terry had a handgun.
She said she just wanted to get her $500 back.
Instead, they now had to try to cover up a murder.
BT told her to pull the car over. She pulled the car over. He got out of the car, pulled Eddie's body out of the front passenger seat, laid it by the side of the road, got back in the car, and they left.
When it's the defense's turn, Blair Terry's attorneys maintain that he wasn't in the car when Eddie was shot.
Blair's defense was, just like he told the investigators, hey, I just got a ride from this lady. They dropped me off. I have no idea how it happened.
Those claims carry little weight with the jury.
Blair Terry is found guilty of murder. He is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
The life sentence without parole would be appropriate for that sort of senseless violence.
Eddie's fiance doesn't see it that way.
I didn't call it justice because it didn't bring him back. But to know that because you took someone's life and you would never be able to live your life the way you want to, it gave me a little bit of peace.
But while Serena feels that Blair Terry's sentence falls short of justice, she believes Felicia's is an outrage.
She was sentenced to a 13-year prison term for second-degree murder.
I was livid about a 13-year sentence. That's not enough.
The reality is that people who cooperate and help the state get a conviction will get the benefit of helping the state get that conviction.
But that still leaves Eddie's family to deal with the aftermath of his untimely death.
He didn't deserve this. There's nothing in this case that would justify pulling the trigger and having Eddie Brown murdered.
As a victim of a violent crime, it didn't just impact him, it impacted all those people that cared about him. And he was a family man. He had people in his life that loved him.
It's just a heartbreaking situation for his fiance and his kids. He had young children that won't really remember him.
Although for his fiancée, Serena, their children do give her a little piece of Eddie to hold on to.
He's not here physically, but I feel him when it comes through my kids. And at times it's like I get frustrated, but then I remember, okay, maybe this is his way of telling me it's gonna be okay. Everything is gonna be okay. Just do what you gotta do. Hold on, keep going, keep fighting, and take it a day at a time. It's tough, but he's watching.
When a popular physician is gunned down outside her office, an entire city is rocked to its core.
Her homicide was shocking and extremely upsetting to very many people.
I just couldn't believe it. I cried for days.
To shoot someone 6 times shows the viciousness of this crime.
But beneath the gunshots lies another, more shocking level of violence.
There was a bite mark, but only the bottom teeth were the ones that were left an impression.
It was a crime of passion. The question is, whose passion?
As detectives step into this woman's life, they'll soon find themselves confronting a string of high-profile suspects, one more powerful and potentially dangerous than the next.
You're talking about a control freak who was a narcissist, a megalomaniac. There is a bigger story here. It's definitely a shock.
Wednesday, November 26, 1997. It's the day before Thanksgiving in Akron, Ohio. At 10:25 a.m., Lori Collins, a medical assistant, steps out the back door of the building where she works for a cigarette break. In the parking lot, she notices a van belonging to her boss, 41-year-old Dr. Margot Prade.
She thought that was odd because they didn't know where Margot was.
Dr. Prade was supposed to arrive at the office about an hour or so earlier. The nurses and the office manager, they were waiting for her because there were so many patients waiting to see her.
Dr. Prade! Dr. Prade! She saw Margot's body slumped over. Oh my gosh! And she saw blood. Dr. Prade! She didn't know whether she was alive or dead.
Lori Collins rushes back into the office to call 911. Within minutes, paramedics are at the scene, but there is little they can do for Margot Prade.
EMTC, she has multiple gunshot wounds. They pronounce her dead at the scene.
What do we got?
No pulse. This was a huge blow to the community. Margot was extremely well known and well loved. The question becomes, obviously, who did this? Who's responsible?
Unraveling this whodunit will be no small task, especially when those responsible are holding all the cards.
There's no gun, there's no bloody clothes. All the things you look for in a homicide, none are present.
Margot Schamberger was born on September 17, 1956 in Akron, Ohio. The youngest of 7 children, Margot began making her mark on the world at an early age.
She loved school when she was a little girl. She skipped the 5th grade because she was so bright. Her scholastic ability was amazing. She just excelled in many different areas.
Margot attended Central Howard High School, where she blossomed into a beautiful and brilliant young woman.
Long, beautiful hair, always dressed very nice, very neat. Her smile was radiant. It just lit up the room.
Margot dated occasionally, but wasn't in a rush to find a man. Then, at a charity event her senior year, she met Douglas Prade, a handsome young Akron police officer.
She was very impressed with him. He's very nice, athletic, strong figure, nice looking and well-spoken. She was smitten.
Name is Douglas.
Margot.
Like Margot, Douglas also grew up in Akron, though he'd left Ohio for a brief period of time after college to serve in the Navy.
He had entered the military when he was young. He was discharged with a medical disorder.
Douglas was 28 years old, 10 years older than Margot, which is a pretty big difference at that age. But they were determined to take it slowly and just see where the relationship went.
Margot graduated high school in 1974, valedictorian of her class. but her dreams for the future were just beginning.
She always wanted to be a doctor, a family practitioner. She wanted to be able to service all ages.
Margot enrolled at Kent State University and took part in a dual program that allowed her to work towards both her bachelor's and medical degrees simultaneously.
It just goes to show you, if you're motivated, what you can do.
Throughout college, Margot continued to date Douglas Praed, whose career was also on the fast track.
He rose steadily through the ranks from patrol to a sergeant in the patrol unit.
In 1979, after Margot graduated med school, she and Douglas married. Soon, 2 daughters, Kenya and Sahara, made their family complete.
She was just so excited to be a mother and have girls. She wanted them to have the best of everything.
Determined to ensure their daughters wanted for nothing, both Margot and Douglas continued climbing their respective career ladders.
Douglas Praed was a commander in the patrol division. He was thought to be next in line to become the next Akron police chief.
Within a few years, Margot completed her residency and opened her own practice in downtown Akron.
You must be Catherine. Yes, hey Catherine. So how are you feeling today? Her practice was thriving. She was very well known and popular. Everyone wanted to have Dr. Praed as their doctor.
Unfortunately, the couple's professional success came with a personal price. The long hours Margot and Douglas both spent on the job left them little time for each other, and eventually they began to drift apart.
They spent so much time away from each other. They were going in different directions. At a certain point, Margot filed for the divorce.
And in April of 1997, the divorce was finalized, with Margot and Doug agreeing to share custody of their 2 daughters. Now 40 and suddenly a single mom, Margot found dating to be a daunting task.
She said, I went out on a blind date the other night. I said, girl, do black people even know how to do blind dates? We don't know how to do blind dates, you know? And she started laughing.
Then in June 1997, a friend introduced Margot to Thomas Houston, an attorney from Columbus, Ohio.
Thomas Houston was a very well-educated attorney who worked for a prestigious law firm.
Thomas was so successful. Really, really nice.
Margot and Thomas made such an intense connection that within a matter of months, they began talking marriage.
What do you think about it?
I love the idea of being Mrs. Houston.
Margot fell in love, and so did Thomas Houston. He just said it was an incredible connection.
She was planning on getting engaged and moving out of town, maybe to Cincinnati. She was just so happy.
Which makes the scene in the parking lot of Margot Praed's medical practice the morning of November 26th all the more horrific.
It was shocking that a prominent doctor in our area was found shot in a parking lot of her own practice.
Margot was a superstar, and she was not just a superstar in the community, she was a superstar within her family. So who would want Margot Praed dead?
As investigators begin combing through the crime scene, they quickly realize that answering that question will be no simple task.
The crime scene just simply didn't make any sense, and the crime itself was so unfathomable that detectives didn't even know where to start looking for answers.
Shortly after 10:30 a.m. on November 26, 1997, police in Akron, Ohio converged on a medical building parking lot where 41-year-old physician Dr. Margot Praed was found dead in the front seat of her minivan. Now, one of the first questions on investigators' minds is how long has Margot been here?
Like most mornings, Margot had gone to do her rounds first. She had gone to the hospital, checked on all of her patients, and then gone to the office. They think she left the hospital about 8:45 or so.
The nurses and her office manager were waiting for Margot to come in as the patients are kind of lining up, and it's 9:15, it's 9:30, it's 9:45, it's 10 o'clock, and they can't reach her.
Her body was found at 10:30 a.m. Had she arrived at 9 a.m., her normal time, is that when she was killed? And if so, why had nobody noticed her body before that?
Detectives considered different motives for the murder,
The most obvious initial concern would be that it was like an attempted carjacking or a robbery because it was in a parking lot.
As they search the car, CSIs discover a diamond tennis bracelet on the passenger seat floor, one they presume belonged to Margot.
Hey, look at this.
One theory was that someone walked up to rob her. Maybe they struggled a little bit over the tennis bracelet, and then this person shot her.
The condition of Margot's clothing seems to support this theory.
She had on her lab coat. It was completely saturated with blood. Buttons on her lab coat were ripped off. We knew there was a struggle in the van with her attacker.
But as police continue searching Margot's van, they begin to wonder if this well-to-do doctor had really been the victim of a crime of opportunity.
They found her purse in the back seat of the car undisturbed with, money and credit cards in it. So they became concerned that this appeared to be an intentional murder.
As CSIs continue processing the scene, patrol officers radio Margot's ex-husband, Captain Douglas Prade, and inform him that there's been an incident outside her practice.
Most of them didn't know that they were divorced. This was not common knowledge, even though it had happened 6 months earlier. When Douglas Prade arrived on scene, he was falling to the ground and holding his face and appearing very distraught.
Though it pains them to see their beloved captain doubled over with grief. Once Douglas Prade gains his composure, investigators know they have a job to do.
Captain, I hate to do this, but I gotta ask you some questions.
That's okay, I understand.
A woman is killed who is the first suspect, the husband. But in this case, the husband is a high-ranking police official and the detective's commanding officer. So this makes for a pretty awkward situation.
Can you tell me where you were this morning?
I was at the gym working out.
What time was this?
9:30.
He was very physically fit. He did work out regularly. It was his normal routine.
Where is this gym?
Over by my apartment. Off Washington, about 4 miles away.
Is there anyone that was there that may have saw you?
There was this woman. I don't know her name, but I've seen her there before. Of course, detectives know that they're gonna have to confirm the captain's alibi.
Captain, we should do a gunshot residue test.
Absolutely. I mean, that's procedure.
A gunshot residue test is a test that is supposed to let you know if someone has recently fired a handgun. It's not 100% reliable, but it's a pretty good indicator.
We have your hand.
A gun residue test was performed on Douglas Prade and was negative.
Can you think of anyone who would want to kill Dr. Prade?
I don't know if you guys know this, but he recently got a divorce.
I didn't. Sorry.
I mean, it was totally amicable. But she did start dating somebody. I think his name is Thomas Houston. I think you need to check him out.
Yes, sir.
I need y'all to find out who did this. Y'all can have any resources y'all need.
Sir.
It really became a hunt for who had the motive to kill Margot. Who would want Margot dead?
And within a matter of hours, investigators would uncover evidence that would have everyone scratching their heads.
Pathologists have seen all kinds of crazy things. I would say they probably have never seen one quite like this.
Detectives in Akron, Ohio are investigating the shooting death of 41-year-old Margot Prade, a prominent and extremely popular family physician.
She just had a huge practice, over 7,000 patients, which is unbelievable for a city this size.
Whether she was helping people with their terminal illnesses or whether she was helping people with their physicals and pee-wee football, she was there for them.
News of Margot's death spreads quickly throughout the city.
I had gotten a phone call from a family friend. I was devastated. My whole body just collapsed.
Margot's body is taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy.
She had been shot 6 times.
This shows the viciousness of this crime. The speculation was that the gun used was a .38 caliber revolver because there were no casings found at the scene.
As the autopsy continues, the medical examiner notices an unusual mark on Margot's upper left arm.
What is it?
That's a bite mark. This was only half of a bite mark, only the bottom. teeth were the ones that were left an impression.
How do you have half a bite mark?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like this before.
The medical examiner also finds signs of the bite mark on Margot's clothing.
There was a slight impression of it on the lab coat, but her lab coat was soaked in blood.
For those present, Margot's injuries seem telling.
The 6 gunshot wounds and the bite mark are indicative that this is a very personal attack, that this is someone Margot Praed knew and someone who was angry at her.
Given the seemingly personal nature of the crime, could Margot's ex-husband Douglas Praed be involved? At the scene, Douglas appeared genuinely overcome with grief and had willingly submitted to a gunshot residue test. But investigators had yet to confirm his alibi.
Douglas told detectives that he was in the gym working out when Margot was shot. And he also said there was one other person in there with him.
With no surveillance cameras at the gym, investigators checked the sign-in sheet from the morning of the murder. Not only is Captain Praed's name on the list, so is that of another individual, a woman named Kathy Lynch. Within the hour, detectives have located her and brought her in for an interview.
Come in.
Hi.
Can we ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Do you remember where you were last Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving in the morning?
I was at the gym.
Miss Lynch would normally go to the gym 5 or 6 days a week and would arrive between 8:30 and 9:30 in the morning.
Do you remember what time you arrived that morning?
I can't be certain for that day.
Was there anyone else there?
There was a man. He was tall, very well built, bald-headed.
Is that Lyme disease?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
So how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
Is the man that you saw that morning at the gym?
That's him. I'm positive.
Kathy Lynch's statement seems to corroborate Captain Praed's alibi, with speculation swirling through Akron that the aspiring police chief might be involved in his ex-wife's murder. Investigators issue a public statement clearing him of any wrongdoing.
He moved back into the home with the daughters. He had custody of the daughters and basically took over the life there.
With Dr. Praed's ex-husband scratched off the suspect list, investigators turn their attention to her new boyfriend, Thomas Houston.
He lived in Columbus. He was in Columbus at the time.
Thomas was the closest man in Margot's life at this point, so maybe there's something going on in the relationship that no one knew about.
Thomas agrees to drive up to Akron for an interview with detectives.
Mr. Houston, I know this is a difficult time, but we have a few questions for you.
I understand.
Houston is completely cooperative with the police. He tells them everything about how he and Margot met and about their relationship, and he seemed genuinely upset about her death.
Are there any problems in your relationship?
We were honestly doing better than ever. We were in love.
He just said they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. The plan was that they were going to be together at Thanksgiving, and they were going to tell everyone that they wanted to get engaged. And then she was murdered the day before that could happen.
Where were you Wednesday morning?
I was at my home in Columbus.
You didn't work that day?
No. I took off to do some personal errands.
He said that he had some things to do before driving up to Akron that afternoon. He was going to help Margot with the Thanksgiving meal and stay over that night.
So when I got the call, I heard she was dead.
Was there anyone with you that morning? Anyone who can verify your whereabouts?
No.
Although Thomas doesn't have anyone who can immediately verify his statement, the 130-mile distance between Columbus and Akron makes him an unlikely suspect.
Columbus is about a 2-hour drive from Akron, and while he can't prove that he was there the entire morning, there was nothing to make detectives suspicious about it.
Okay. Thanks for your help. We'll be in touch if we have any more questions.
Desperate for a more substantial lead, detectives hold a press conference, asking the public to come forward with any information they may have regarding the murder. The request immediately pays off.
Detective, you might want to come read this.
Investigators receive a letter with no return address and no signature. But the author of this letter says they have information about who killed Margot.
In fact, the author even identifies the killer by name. Denise Evans, a friend of Margot's.
Police have no idea who the tipster is, but they now have a name, and they know that they need to find out everything they can about Denise Evans.
For nearly a week with little success. Then, after making a public plea for information, they receive an anonymous letter claiming that Denise Evans, a friend of Margot's, was responsible for her death.
There was some thought that there were some hard feelings between her and Margot. Maybe there was some jealousy or envy of her relationship with Thomas Houston.
Detectives locate Denise and interview her and her husband James about the allegations.
We appreciate your cooperation.
Oh, certainly.
How long have you known Margot?
For close to about 10 years now.
We used to socialize with both of them, her and Douglas, before the divorce.
Denise explains that after the divorce, she and Margot remained friends, and that she was the one who introduced Margot to Thomas Houston.
She set Margot up with the blind date with Thomas.
Were you jealous of Margot's relationship with Thomas?
What?
That's crazy. Why would you say something like that? The detective puts all his cards on the table and he tells him about the contents of this anonymous letter.
This is outrageous. I can't even imagine who would say something like that.
So it's not true? No, absolutely not.
Denise and James Evans deny the allegations in the letter. They also are able to provide solid alibis as to where they were the morning of the murder. So the police end the interview.
Thank you for your time speaking with us. We'll be in touch.
Thanks.
The investigation is back at square one. Meanwhile, Dr. Margot's family lays her to rest in a ceremony that draws citywide attention.
It was huge. The line was wrapped around the church. People were devastated, sobbing.
The two individuals felt the weight of this tragedy in a way that no one else could. Margot's daughters, 12-year-old Kenya and 8-year-old Sahara.
Kenya Sahir was so young, and everyone was there for Kenya Sahir. We supported those girls wholeheartedly.
With each passing day, the frustration builds for investigators as they search desperately for any clue that might lead to the killer. Then they finally get a break. They learn a car dealership next to Margot's office has surveillance cameras which point in the direction of the parking lot.
Today, of course, most businesses have surveillance cameras, but back in 1997, that was not the case.
But the video's quality is a far cry from today's high-def standards.
If it wasn't digital technology, we even sent this video to NASA, trying to get it as clear as humanly possible.
One thing police get is a timeline of the shooting. The enhanced video shows Margot's van arriving at her office at 9:09 a.m.
The officers also discover that there had been a white car waiting there for at least 10 minutes, and then you could see a very shadowy figure get out of that white car, walk over to the minivan, and get in the passenger door. And about 90 seconds transpired, and then they opened the door. A few more seconds transpired, and then that person went back to the white car and left.
There's no doubt in detectives' minds that this person is the killer. But the poor quality of the footage poses another problem.
The image was so grainy, they couldn't even tell whether it was a man or a woman.
The owner of the car dealership has other key information.
So you knew Dr. Pratt, is that correct?
Oh yeah, I knew Dr. Pratt. In fact, I spoke with her that morning.
You did? About what?
Well, she was buying a new car from me, an SUV. It was on order, so she was calling to see when it might be coming in.
Aside from this new SUV, the dealer had also sold Margot the van she was driving on the day of the murder. He informs detectives of a unique safety feature it included.
When you got it up over 15 miles an hour, all the doors automatically lock. And they stay locked, even when you stop.
So when she pulled into the lot, all the doors were locked?
Yeah.
So in order for someone to get into the car, they either had to have a key, or Margot would have had to have unlocked the door.
This confirms what police already suspected. Margot's killer was someone she knew. The two men closest to the doctor were her ex-husband, Police Captain Douglas Praed, and her new boyfriend, Thomas Houston. Now detectives wonder if they had been too quick to dismiss them as suspects.
It was known by friends and family that Doug Praed had a key to the van that Margot was driving.
Thomas could have had a key to the van, But even if he didn't, Margot would have let him in.
His locking mechanism now prohibits detectives from ruling her out. But before inquiries can be reopened into these three potential suspects, a surprise witness comes forward with game-changing information about the morning of the murder.
He was there that morning. He saw the white car driving away, and he could identify who was driving it.
Detectives in Akron, Ohio believe the individual responsible for the murder of Dr. Margot Prade was someone close to her. And while surveillance footage of the crime scene can't specifically ID the killer, investigators have one other key piece of evidence that might: the bite mark on Margot's arm.
Now, a bite mark is not as conclusive as, let's say, a fingerprint is, but it can be compared to a suspect's teeth to either include them or exclude them.
And so we decided, let's start getting exemplars and let's start seeing if we can't exclude some of these other suspects that have been thrown out here.
Investigators obtained dental impressions from numerous people, including ex-husband Douglas Prade, boyfriend Thomas Houston, and Margot's friend Denise Evans. As comparisons are being conducted by a forensic dentist, investigators use the surveillance video to cross-reference the alibis of their three potential suspects. They start with police captain Doug Prade.
When they had initially looked at Doug Prade, they believed that the murder had happened somewhere between 9:30 to 10:15. But now they know that the murder happened somewhere around 9:10 or 9:12. This is a completely different story.
Doug Prade had told detectives he was working out between 9:30 and 10:30, and a witness was able to verify that.
But Doug Prade's apartment was only a 6-minute drive away from Margot's office, so he could have been in that parking lot at 9:12 and then to the gym by 9:30.
When police questioned Doug the morning of the murder, they tested his hands for gunshot residue. The initial results were negative, but when investigators dig deeper into the report, they uncover an important error.
It was a new gunshot residue kit, and the person that did the test forgot to remove the tape, and so they swabbed his hands, and they didn't get any sample.
Investigators also dig deeper into Doug and Margot's divorce, and soon discover it was anything but amicable.
Initially, Margot's friends and family did not want to come forward and say anything negative about Doug. After all, he's a police captain. But eventually, slowly, they started coming forward and saying how volatile the relationship had become.
There were a whole host of issues going on with Margot and Doug's marriage. Doug had had multiple affairs and in fact had fathered a child by another woman.
Friends and family say Margot was willing to look the other way, at least for a while.
Where have you been?
I didn't think you would still be up.
Well, I'm surprised you thought about me at all those little girlfriends you've been running around with.
Come on, don't do this right now.
I'm sick of being your doormat. Think you could walk all over me.
Margot's friends say that eventually she became fed up with Doug's serial infidelity and filed for divorce. As for Doug, he wasn't so much okay with the divorce as he was in denial.
Doug wouldn't even hire a lawyer, wouldn't sign the papers. It became an uncontested divorce because he wouldn't get involved in any way.
And when the presiding judge awarded Margot the family home, Doug refused to acknowledge that decision as well.
He had keys to the house, so he would just let himself in.
Ultimately, Margot had to obtain a court order to have Doug removed from the home.
Margot's finally free to start dating other men. This incensed Doug even more.
When she would be out, he would question the babysitter and later the children on where she had been and who she was with.
When Margot starts dating Thomas Houston, that really sets Doug off. Not only is he a professional, a well-to-do attorney, he also doesn't live in Akron. He lives in Columbus, which means that Doug has no control over him.
He couldn't let go. I remember one time I was over at her house, and he came in. Me and Margot was there.
Margot! You gotta talk about this right now! Who's this guy Thomas you've been seeing? Who's Thomas? Get out of here right now!
And I never saw rage like that. Scaring rage. Frightful rage. I'm talking about fear.
We gonna talk about this, Margot!
her wits' end, in November of 1997, Margot called her attorney to discuss further legal action against her ex-husband.
Doug came over unannounced again.
She wants to go back to court to have Doug's joint custody revoked. This will mean he couldn't see his daughters whenever he wanted.
And while Margot Praed was moving on and starting a new life, his life was somewhat unraveling. He was in financial trouble. He had a lot of debt, and she was going after him for more child support.
But apparently, Margot also took issue with something Doug did just prior to her death.
She complained about Doug having keys to her van. He used it anytime he wanted to without her permission.
Detectives have to wonder, did Doug use his key that morning to enter Margot's van and kill her?
The problem is that this is all very circumstantial. Douglas Praed appears to have a motive. He's very jealous of the relationship that Margot has. He also is having financial difficulties, but this is not enough for an arrest.
The investigation grinds on. Then almost 3 months after the shooting, a man named Howard Brooks comes forward with a shocking revelation.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, sir.
So, tell us what you know.
His name was Howard Brooks, and he was a patient of Margot's. And he had just been there that morning.
And after the appointment, I was outside waiting on my ride to come. And I saw this white car just peel out the parking lot.
At the time, Brooks didn't think it was a big deal. But later on, people he talked to thought he should go to the police.
So did you get a good look at the driver?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you recognize him if you saw him again?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sure.
The detectives show him a photo lineup, which includes a photo of Douglas Praed.
That's him. That's him right there.
You're sure?
Positive.
Howard was very adamant that Doug Praed was the driver of the car. He also felt that perhaps there might have been someone else in the car with him. He wasn't sure.
Detectives now believe they have enough evidence to arrest Douglas Praed for his ex-wife's murder. But there are still nagging questions.
Howard Brooks' statement places Doug Praed at the scene, but it does not prove that he was the shooter. What about the other person in the car? Could they have been the shooter or an accomplice?
A witness named Howard Brooks has identified Margot Praed's ex-husband Douglas as the man he saw speed away from her office on the morning of November 26, 1997. While detectives think Douglas shot his ex-wife out of jealousy, they have questions about the second person Howard places inside the getaway car.
Could this other person in the car be the actual shooter? Could Doug Praed have just been the getaway driver?
As investigators ponder these questions, comparisons on the bite mark impressions on Margot's upper left arm are completed.
That was the lab. The mold they made of Doug's mouth, it matches Margot.
You have to remember, this was only half of a bite mark, but only the bottom teeth were the ones that were left an impression. Doug had an upper partial denture, so his entire upper mouth was a denture that was removable.
When the mold of Doug's lower teeth was compared to the bite mark on Margot's arm, it's a match. And it's enough to convince detectives that Doug must be the shooter.
Looks like he's our guy.
The bite mark had to have taken place during the assault. Doug got into the car, he struggled with Margot over the gun, and he bit her.
On February 23, 1998, Akron police arrest one of their own, Captain Douglas Praed, and charge him with the murder of his ex-wife.
When he got arrested, everybody was elated.
The arrest of a high-ranking police official for murder is front-page news all over the state.
Akron police captain kills his ex-wife, who's a prominent doctor. It's unprecedented. One of Akron's most notorious murder cases.
As prosecutors prepare for trial, investigators uncover even more damning evidence against Douglas.
It was a bank deposit from 6 weeks prior to the homicide. On the back side of it, he had handwritten out numerous bills that he had, and then they were totaled up. And then that total amount was subtracted from the sum of $75,000.
Now, $75,000 is significant because that is the amount of money that Douglas had to gain if Margot had died prior to February of 1998, in which time her life insurance policy would expire. Douglas Praed was the only beneficiary of that life insurance.
On September 1st, 1998, in a Summit County courtroom, the state of Ohio versus Douglas Praed gets underway. Armed with their new cache of evidence, prosecutors open their case by painting a picture of a jealous and controlling ex-husband who would rather kill his ex-wife than see her with another man.
You have an ugly divorce. You have Doug Praed exhibiting controlling and abusive behavior. Margot Praed had told friends and family she was in fear for her life.
He knew she was planning to marry Thomas Houston. He knew she was going to court to try to take away custody, to try to increase child support, and he wasn't going to stand for it.
Prosecutors argue that on the morning of the murder, Captain Praed drove to his ex-wife's office, arriving just before 9. Praed waited in the parking lot for Margot's van to arrive.
She pulled in a little after 9. He walked over to the van, probably unlocked the passenger side door with his key.
Margot, open up the door.
Douglas, what are you doing here?
Let me in. I want to talk to you.
No, I'm not letting you in. There's nothing to talk
Let me in the door.
about. No, there's nothing to talk about. What are you doing?
He gets inside. They are.
Please get out of my car.
Yeah, we need to talk about this. Let's
There's
get this out.
nothing to talk about.
He pulls a gun on her.
We're gonna be together.
He points a gun at her, and she didn't just sit there and take it. She fought it. I don't think he was expecting that. And so he ended up doing something that was not planned by biting her.
He emptied the gun into her. Then he went back into his car and he left. And as he was passing Margot's building, he was seen by Howard Brooks, who was standing outside waiting for his ride.
Doug drives back to his apartment complex and rushes down to the gym, trying to establish an alibi.
I don't think he counted on the fact that we were going to be able to pinpoint the exact moment of the homicide.
But Doug's defense attorneys argue that the prosecution's case is purely circumstantial, and that there is no direct evidence linking him to the crime.
No weapon was ever found, no clothing worn at the time of the shooting was found, no car was ever found.
The defense also attacks the testimony of Howard Brooks and his identification of Doug as the driver of the white car.
He did not come forward until a couple of months after the crime. Police showed a number of photo lineups that were suggestive, some people say.
To cement their case, the defense makes a bold decision and calls Captain Doug Praed himself to the stand.
Douglas Praed asserted that the divorce was amicable and that he was staying in her home at her request.
When he testified, I wouldn't say he did a bad job of testifying, but he painted a pretty rosy picture of their relationship.
Prosecutors counter by pointing to the bite mark found on Margot's body, which they claim is proof Doug was the one who murdered her.
We had photographs of Doug's teeth, the bottom half, and we had photographs of Margot's arm. And we literally slid one right over the other for the jury, with the expert there to say, see, which they could see. It's a match.
On September 23rd, 1998, after 3 weeks of back and forth testimony, both sides rest and the jury begins deliberations.
I really was emotionally invested in this case. I highly identified with Margot Praed. She was just such a remarkable person. I just felt very strongly that her death deserved justice.
After just 4 hours behind closed doors, the jury returns with a verdict.
Douglas E. Praed, guilty of the offense. He was found guilty of aggravated murder.
We were relieved because Margot had some justice. And it wasn't just us, it was for her. It was for the community. It was for all the good cops that are out there.
Even as Judge Mary Spicer sentences Douglas Praed to life in prison, the former police captain remains defiant.
I absolutely did not kill her. I stand here in front of you talking to you like this is a convicted person. I'm an innocent convicted person.
He stood up in court and says, "You are sending an innocent man to prison."
He just keeps saying he's innocent. That's sick and twisted. You pulled the trigger.
Although nothing can Margot prayed back, her memory lives on in friends, family, and the city who loved her.
I want my aunt to remember for being one of the best doctors in this city. She had a great work ethic. She was nurturing to her patients. She was an angel. I know she's smiling down on us. I know I'm the mother today because of
From the moment they met, they were head over heels.
She was like, "Ma, he look good." He was really in love with her.
They were talking about getting married.
But before wedding bells can ring, tragedy strikes.
She was viciously murdered. It was extremely violent.
You just can't believe it. I just screamed, I cried. I will never forget that day.
Those images never really leave you.
When the motive is finally revealed, the list of suspects grows.
This was shocking.
No one saw it coming.
If I knew, I would have went to the police.
I just didn't imagine that this was going to happen to my child, my daughter, my baby.
February 20th, 2016. It's a chilly Saturday morning in the quiet community of West Haven, Connecticut.
West Haven just outside of New Haven. It's more of the suburban area in New Haven.
Typically, it's very friendly and pretty safe community.
But this isn't a typical Saturday morning. It's a little before 7:30 when Patricia Folsom arrives outside the apartment complex where her adopted daughter, 26-year-old Kenita Nicholas, lives.
She used to babysit for her, so that morning she was going there to get the baby for her so she can go to work.
The normal routine would be that she would pull up into the apartment complex, beat the horn, and Kenita would bring the baby out to her.
I was just outside, just beeping, and, call her.
But Kenita doesn't answer.
Hey, it's Kenita. Leave a message. Kenita, where are you? I'm outside.
Several minutes pass with no sign of Kenita and the baby. Concerned, Patricia gets out of her car and goes to the door.
Kenita, are you in there?
Once again, there's no answer. But what Patricia does here sends her into a panic.
I'm banging on the door, trying to get in, and I just hear the baby screaming and crying.
Kenita, are you okay?
The mother was rightly concerned. Her daughter was supposed to be there to let her in.
My heart, honestly, I thought maybe she slipped in the tub and got hurt.
With no key to open the door, and fearing that something has happened to her daughter, Patricia calls 911.
West Haven Fire was the first to get there.
Please get my baby.
Fearing that the baby was in danger, they decided that they would breach the door.
As firemen enter the apartment, Patricia follows close behind, and what she sees is far worse than anything she could have imagined.
I kind of pushed up in there, and I kind of see the scene.
26-year-old Kenita Nicholas had a vibrant energy that brought joy to everyone she met.
Just very silly and just spontaneous and spunky. She's been the same way her whole life.
She was goofy. She would always jump around, joke around.
She would give off this aura about her. Like she had no worries in the world.
However, Kenita's loving nature stemmed from a troubled childhood.
She had suffered quite a bit of abuse and neglect as a child. She'd been shuffled from home to home, living with various relatives.
At one point in time, Kenita lived with me and my grandmother for a while.
It was only when she was in high school that Kenita had found a permanent home with Patricia Folsom.
I knew that she needed somebody to love her, and so I went and got custody of her. And she became my daughter. She was very
trusted her. She looked at her as a mom. We just got closer and closer, and she was my heart. I loved her. She's the daughter I never had.
Patricia and Kenita remained close, even after Kenita moved to the Hartford area for college.
She went to Central State University, wanted to be a social worker.
During her freshman year at Central State, Kenita met an aspiring musician named Antonio Chambly.
He was working at the campus radio station at the time, doing a promotion. She walked by, and he struck up a conversation with her.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Hey, we're doing a show this weekend? You should come.
The chance encounter soon turned into a relationship.
I think they just clicked and connected.
Things seemed really great between them. They had a lot of fun together.
However, a year into the relationship, their lives suddenly changed.
I remember her telling me that she was pregnant for her daughter.
They loved each other, and now they were expecting a child. So they decided to get a place together so they could raise the baby.
Kenita dropped out of school and in 2011 gave birth to a baby girl.
She was a great mom. That was one of the things that made her happy, just being able to be responsible for her life.
She did everything she was supposed to as a mom and really embraced the role of motherhood.
But before their daughter's second birthday, Kenita and Antonio called it quits.
She loved him, but she never really stated why. She wasn't one to tell all her personal business. She wanted to move back to the area where her family was, so that's what she did. At the time in her life, I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
Needing the support of her family, Kenita and her daughter moved back in with Patricia.
They lived with her mother temporarily. Then Kenita took a housekeeping job at a local hotel.
She was like, I'm working my butt off, but at least it's gonna pay some money enough for me to get my own place.
She found an apartment. She was so happy. It was like a exciting thrill for her.
That was her first apartment that she ever had on her own. And she was very proud of it. She was like, whew, my daughter got her own room. She wanted to give her child a better life than she had. And that's what she was doing, and fixing up her little apartment for her and her daughter.
Between the new apartment, work, and her daughter, Kenita stayed busy, but still found time to hang out with her friends, too.
She worked her job and did what she had to do so she could have fun, too. But she wasn't looking for a relationship. So if she was interested in anybody.
Then, in June of 2014, Kenita met 35-year-old Gerard Crosley, and that all changed.
Her best friend was Gerard's cousin, and she introduced her to him.
I can really put them on my people.
You know, right? He was kind of quiet and a sweet guy.
Gerard wasted no time asking Kenita out, and their relationship quickly blossomed.
Oh, hey, baby.
He was really in love with her and used to get her roses and flowers and things like that.
Oh, they're beautiful.
You like them?
Thank you. Yes.
She was really digging him. She just felt loved and appreciated.
The couple continued to grow closer and took steps to be together as often as they could.
He eventually moved in with her. She got him a job where she worked.
In the fall of 2014, the couple took the next step when Kenita became pregnant.
She was like, I'm having a boy. She always wanted a boy.
With the birth of their son in June of 2015, it looked as if Gerard and Kenita were ready to solidify their family.
She said, we are going to get married. She was thinking long term with him. She was really in love.
But soon a tragedy would darken the bright future the couple envisioned. On February 20th, 2016, West Haven first responders have just found Kenita bloody and unresponsive on her apartment floor.
My baby, Kenita, no.
They started pushing me out so that I wouldn't see no more. And I'm like, well, give me the baby. Give me the baby.
The 7-month-old child was present in that room.
I just left with the baby, trying not to think about what was going on.
Outside, paramedics work to determine if there are any injuries to the infant.
His clothes were
was all bloody, but he was fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
Sadly, the same cannot be said for Kenita.
I said, how is she? And the guy just like shook his head. No.
Is she okay?
No.
The news of Kenita's death leaves her family grasping for answers.
Who would kill Kenita? It's completely senseless.
For Kenita Nicholas and Gerard Crosley, there appear to be no limits to their love.
She was in love with him, and she just wanted to be a family with her 2 kids and him and her, and just be happy.
But on the morning of February 20th, 2016, West Haven, Connecticut firefighters have just found Kenita dead inside the couple's apartment.
That was absolutely brutal scene. There was blood everywhere.
Even at first glance, it was obvious she had been murdered.
Her throat had been cut, and she also had wounds to her upper torso area and to her arms, indicating some sort of a fight.
When detectives arrive on the scene, they immediately treat it as a homicide.
It was a pretty violent struggle that moved throughout that apartment, throughout that immediate living room where the deceased was located.
While they're able to piece together how the crime may have unfolded, the motive is not clear.
It did not appear that this was a robbery.
There was no signs of forced entry. There was nothing stolen.
In fact, the only thing missing appears to be the murder weapon.
In the kitchen, the police found that the drawer had been opened where knives were kept, so that led them to conclude that it was possible that the knife that had been used to murder her had been taken from that drawer.
Who had wielded that knife? The blood on the walls may contain a clue.
It's common that in stabbings of this type, the suspect could become injured.
There could very well be a mix of the assailant's blood with Kenita's. This would definitively link the person to the crime.
Thank you.
While crime scene technicians collect blood samples, detectives start speaking to neighbors who have gathered outside.
We spoke to the neighbors, and all of them said that they heard some type of arguing and what they described as loud bangs coming from the apartment sometime between 7 o'clock and 7:20 in the morning.
Then there was no more arguing and only a baby crying.
One neighbor also reports seeing a possible suspect fleeing the area.
She saw someone dressed in a dark-colored gray and black hoodie sweatshirt, like a fleece-style sweatshirt, walking through the back of the apartment complex.
The witness didn't know the person, but told police they were walking away from the scene at around 7:30, just moments after Kenita's mom arrived.
Police started to canvass that particular neighborhood in order to see if they could find any surveillance footage, which would help them identify who this individual was.
While patrol officers search for cameras, detectives turn to Kenita's adoptive mother, Patricia Folsom.
Excuse me, ma'am. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?
Patricia had been waiting in the ambulance with her daughter's 7-month-old.
The fact that the baby was there when she was killed horrified me. That absolutely stood out to me.
You can have your grandson back in a moment. Ma'am, we just need you to answer a few questions.
I'll try. She was still in shock. I mean, she had just talked to her daughter, and now she's found dead in her apartment.
You spoke to Kenita this morning?
Yeah, it was around 7.
She had talked to Kenita about picking up the 7-month-old baby so that Kenita could go to work that day.
Patricia was already keeping Kenita's 5-year-old daughter, whom she left at home that morning with her adult son while she went to get the baby.
She was going to go over, and she was going to give Kenita a ride to work, come back, watch the kids.
Based on when Patricia last spoke to Kenita and when she arrived, detectives come to a terrifying conclusion.
We believe that Patricia Folsom had arrived at the apartment when the suspect was still inside.
Do you have any idea who may have been inside the apartment with Kenita this morning?
Gerard was supposed to be at work.
Gerard, Kenita's boyfriend, was already at work.
He worked in the kitchen, like breakfast stuff, because he used to go early in the morning, like before 5. She didn't say anything about Antonio coming back.
Antonio?
Yeah. Kenita's ex. Her daughter's father.
Patricia Folsom was able to provide information regarding the older child's father.
Patricia said she thought that they got along well, but Kenita was pretty private about her relationships. So if something was wrong, she probably wouldn't have mentioned it.
She kept me out of that. I don't know. They seemed like they were good.
Any custody issues?
Not until Gerard came in the picture.
Antonio didn't like the idea of Gerard being there around his child and essentially trying to raise his child.
To detectives, it was possible Antonio confronted Kenita and an argument ensued. It definitely seemed like a crime of passion.
Based on the amount of injuries to Kenita Nicholas's body, it appeared to us that this was some type of a rage incident.
However, just as detectives are realizing they need to talk to Antonio, Patricia raises another possibility.
That was Danielle, too. Her and Kenita didn't get along.
Whoa. Who's Danielle?
Gerard's ex.
Patricia tells detectives that Gerard has a lot of history with this woman. He fathered children with her.
According to Patricia, Kenita tried to get along with Danielle for the sake of the children, but to no avail.
She was jealous of the relationship that Kenita was having with Gerard.
She would say she was having problems with the other parent.
Were there fights between the women?
No, mainly arguing.
So nothing physical?
Not from what I know. Everybody was kind of, a little grouchy about how they wanted to work out situations with each other. I was just like, just try to be nice. Kenita wasn't that type.
But now that Kenita had been found dead, detectives wondered if the tension between the two women had turned violent.
You need to find Gerard. Find out what he knows. There's always a chance when someone's fighting. You're fighting with someone that you could really end up like that.
According to FBI statistics, guns are the most common weapon used to commit homicide. The odds of being murdered by a firearm are nearly 7 times higher than the odds of being murdered by a knife. In 2016, 73% of U.S. murders were committed with a firearm, while only a little more than 10% were committed with a knife or sharp object. Detectives investigating the murder of Kenita Nicholas have just learned of tensions between the 26-year-old mother of 2 and a woman named Danielle Hall.
Kenita's boyfriend, Gerard Crossley, had previously dated Danielle, and they had children together.
Kenita had been reaching out to Gerard's kids, trying to make them feel welcome in his new family.
She tried to have them come over, but the other parent had issues with that. It just wasn't working.
Is it possible Danielle had something to do with Kenita's death? When detectives bring her in for questioning, she appears shocked by the news.
When did this happen?
This morning.
When detectives pressed Danielle about what Kenita's mom told them, she admitted that her and Kenita were hardly friends.
However, Danielle swears that she had nothing to do with Kenita's murder.
Where were you at 7:30 this morning?
I was still at work.
Danielle told detectives she worked third shift and didn't get off until 8:30 a.m.
Detectives will have to confirm Danielle's alibi. But before they do, she suggests perhaps Gerard may be a victim as well.
Is Gerard okay?
We're still trying to get in touch with him.
Well, just so you know, he's been mixed up with some pretty bad people in the past.
She told us that he was pretty well known in the drug trade, both seller and consumer of narcotics.
The people he used to run with, they scare me. Maybe this has something to do with them.
After talking to Danielle, detectives pulled Gerard's rap sheet.
He had a pretty serious criminal record. He had been arrested for some drug offenses.
Police started to wonder, was this crime the result of money that Gerard owed to somebody else that he hadn't paid that now fell on Kenita?
So it was imperative that we found him not only to interview him about what he knew, but to make sure that he's not injured or a victim himself.
Detectives contact the hotel where he works and make an alarming discovery.
He didn't show up to work that morning.
Next, detectives make several calls to Gerard's cell phone, but they all go unanswered.
They started to wonder if Gerard was actually murdered somewhere as a result of this, or he's on the run from whoever may be hunting him.
Though detectives are unable to reach Gerard, they are able to find Kenita's ex, Antonio Chambly.
He was obviously somebody we wanted to talk to and find out what he knew about the crime.
Once contacted by detectives, Antonio makes the 45-minute drive from Hartford to West Haven.
I want to thank you for coming in here to speak with us today.
Sure. I still can't believe this.
He seemed pretty shaken up about it.
He was looking for information about what happened and was just concerned for the welfare of his own child.
I don't know what I'm gonna tell her.
Your daughter?
Yeah.
You and Kenita shared custody, right?
Well, not officially. We never went to court or anything.
When they split, they had split custody of her, so he would have her half of the time and she would have her half of the time. Well, it wasn't a court order or something like that.
So you got along?
Yeah. Probably better than we were together.
They always remained friends. It was very cordial and co-parenting together.
And her being with Gerard, that didn't bother you? No, she's free to see what she wants.
Okay.
Antonio tells detectives he had no real issues with Gerard either. He was just initially cautious of another man helping to raise his child.
You know, he never liked him for his daughter.
So what was the problem?
It was kind of weird, having my daughter around some strange man. But Kenita, she told me to stay in my own lane. So I did.
So he was accepting to it.
Based on his genuine concern for both his child and Kenita, detectives believe Antonio is innocent.
It seemed like he had a pretty good relationship with her.
We're not enemies. We're not constantly bickering. We're not arguing. So it was kind of weird for some people to accept that we were just real good friends.
At this time, we did not believe that he was involved in any way.
I'm just in a place where it's like, wow, I just lost one of my best friends. Thank you, God. My daughter wasn't there to see it.
Detectives can't rule out the possibility that someone close to Kenita had killed her, though. And when they receive both the autopsy and blood analysis, they hope to have a new lead.
The forensic report was that Kenita Nicholas received numerous stab wounds, as well as a significant laceration to her neck and throat area. Kenita was stabbed 30 times.
A stabbing like that, that's personal in nature.
It just screams it's a crime of passion.
However, the lab results on the blood found in Kenita's apartment don't yield the leads police were hoping for.
According to the lab results, it was only Kenita's blood on the wall.
Detectives are disappointed, but will soon learn that Antonio and Gerard aren't the only romantic links in Kenita's life.
We were contacted by an individual who was now in a new dating relationship with Kenita Nicholas.
It was a romantic relationship. They were romantically involved.
Detectives are shocked by the caller's claim, but even more so by their name.
The caller identified herself as Melissa Kelly.
Please find out that Kenita was in a new relationship with another woman.
Detectives were under the impression that Kenita was only currently involved with Gerard, so this information brought a new motive into the mix.
They were convinced that this relationship must have had something to do with Kenita's murder.
Less than 24 hours into the murder investigation of Kenita Nicholas, a witness comes forward to West Haven police with surprising information.
Gerard and Kenita had broken up, and Kenita had started this new relationship with a woman by the name of Melissa. She learned about what happened to Kenita and contacted the West Haven Police Department and advised that she'd had some information about what had occurred.
Detectives immediately arranged for 28-year-old Melissa Kelly to come down to the station for a statement.
So how many people knew about the two of you?
I don't know. I thought we were a secret. She was supposed to tell her mom soon.
Kenita's mother didn't tell detectives about the new girlfriend because she didn't know.
She kept it quiet from me because it was a relationship that I would not have agreed with.
How long did you know Kenita?
We have been friends for a while.
It's been like over a year that they knew each other.
But they had only been dating for a few weeks now.
I just can't believe that she's gone.
She told the police she was looking forward to seeing this relationship grow and blossom.
Kenita deserved a little bit of happiness, especially after all that Gerard would do to her.
What do you mean?
He would hit her.
Kenita had indicated to her that there was a lot of domestic violence, that he had previously struck her and abused her in the past.
According to Melissa, the abuse was so severe, Kenita would call out of work.
Did she ever file a report?
No. She came to me about it, though, for advice.
She said he was on drugs and he was doing things to my cousin, putting his hands on her.
Melissa tells detectives that with her encouragement, Kenita had broken things off with Gerard.
She said enough is enough. I don't want to be with you no more. I'm not happy. This is not working. This is not good for my kids.
According to Melissa, her relationship with Kenita began to gain momentum after the split with Gerard.
They started hanging out more because that's who Kenita felt safe with and she trusted this person.
Thank you. For what?
Being here for me. It was a new chapter. She was trying to find happiness.
However, according to Melissa, even as their romance grew more heated, Gerard was still in the picture.
Kenita kept the severity of the abuse from her family. Gerard would cool off and things would be fine, so she let him stay at the house to be close to their son.
She let him keep a key to her house and to come in to see her son whenever he wanted to.
Melissa says, even though Kenita ended the romantic relationship with Gerard, he was not letting go.
He was still trying. He thought that he could get back with her.
Did he know about you and Kenita?
Yeah, she told him.
According to Melissa, when Kenita finally told Gerard the truth about their relationship, he didn't take it well.
It wasn't like Kenita was leaving him for another man. She was leaving him for another woman. So pride becomes a factor, ego becomes a factor, and just a general challenge to his manhood.
According to Melissa, Gerard was a powder keg waiting to explode, and all he needed was the right spark.
When was the last time you saw Kenita?
She was at my apartment last night.
Where was the baby?
She brought him with her. She didn't trust Gerard alone with the baby.
Melissa claims Kenita returned home around 11 p.m. and called her shortly after.
When Kenita got home, they spoke on the phone, and Kenita told her that Gerard was upset that she was out late.
You didn't hang up that phone.
Gerard was not happy with her and Kenita's relationship. He was upset that they were spending time together.
Melissa tells police that during their conversation, she could hear Gerard in the background.
He was like yelling and screaming.
So why didn't you call the police?
She said she had it under control, but I know that Gerard did this to her. I know that he did this.
She wanted to make sure that if it was Mr. Crosley, that he was apprehended quickly.
However, there is one aspect to Melissa's story detectives find troubling.
Melissa's story is the first they've heard about Gerard being abusive.
I really didn't think that he would do that. He really didn't seem like he had that kind of temper. No
nobody in our family knew that she was going through any of that stuff.
Detectives had to consider the possibility that Melissa was not being truthful.
Could Melissa be pointing the finger at Gerard to cover her tracks?
Kenita Nicholas's lover, Melissa Kelly, has just leveled a stunning accusation against Kenita's ex-boyfriend, Gerard Crosley.
Melissa told detectives that Gerard had been abusing Kenita.
Melissa also gives detectives new information about the night before Kenita's murder.
She was able to tell us that she and Kenita had spent the evening together the previous night. Kenita takes a cab home around 11 o'clock. She gets home and Gerard's pissed, angry that she was out with her and that there was fighting throughout the night.
Where's it been all night?
However, detectives aren't sure Melissa's telling the truth.
When Kenita's mom spoke to detectives, she didn't say anything about Gerard being abusive.
He's a very quiet person, and no way do you see that he had a temper.
And you didn't go over there? Call 911? Anything?
She said that she had it under control. She's a grown woman. She'll call me if she needs me. That was the kind of attitude she had.
It was enough to raise red flags with detectives.
They begin to wonder whether or not Melissa and Kenita could be possibly fighting about Gerard.
And it didn't bother you? Gerard's still hanging around?
Like I said, I was worried.
But you weren't jealous.
Jealous of what? I was with Kenita, not Gerard.
Still unsure of Melissa's story, detectives let her go and figure there's at least one person still out there who knows the truth. Gerard.
Knowing that he might have been either involved or a witness, we made it a priority to find out where he was.
But it's not until the afternoon of the 23rd, almost 72 hours after the murder, that detectives get their first potential lead on Gerard's whereabouts.
We were able to develop information that he had some family in New Haven, and we were able to locate Gerard Crossley's sister.
Ma'am, we're with the West Haven Homicide Unit.
Is this about Kenita?
She indicated that she had spoke to Gerard.
When was that?
Saturday morning, a little before 8 a.m.
Gerard had contacted her requesting to borrow some money. She also indicated that he didn't seem like himself. He seemed a little off, was what she told us.
Hey, that's what's up.
You okay?
What? Yeah.
And how's that baby doing?
Baby? Oh, yeah, the baby. Yeah, he's fine.
You sure you're alright?
Gerard told her that him and Kenita had an argument, had a fight.
She kick you out?
I just can't go back.
According to his sister, she didn't learn that Kenita had been murdered until later that afternoon.
She sees on somebody's Facebook page that she was dead.
And you didn't have any idea before that?
Well, I knew he was acting strange, but I never suspected anything like that.
When we talked to Gerard's sister, I kind of got the feeling that she was loyal to her brother, and she was kind of torn.
In light of this new information, Gerard is now at the top of the suspect list.
He's not injured. He's not a victim in this situation. And the gears kind of switched to he becomes a person of interest at this point.
Where can we find him?
Maybe my cousin's. He stays there sometimes.
Detectives reach out to Gerard's cousin and receive some unexpected news.
We spoke to the cousin who told us that Gerard was at their apartment. He's ready to turn himself in.
Detectives immediately descend on the apartment and apprehend Gerard Crosley.
Get on the ground! Gerard didn't resist and surrendered to the detectives.
Gerard Crossley, you're under arrest for the murder of Kenita Nicholas.
He goes quietly, and he indicates to us that he's willing to talk about what had happened.
And then what happened is it takes another shocking twist, and this one is one that police can't even believe.
When I found out he was arrested,
just was disgusted. So I was really just like, I still just wanted a reason. That's not going to make my family feel any better or bring her back. But still, when somebody do something, sometimes you just want to know, like, why? I don't think we will ever get that answer.
On February 23rd, 2016, detectives in West Haven, Connecticut have just arrested 37-year-old Gerard Crosley for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Kenita Nicholas.
There's a sense of relief. There's a sense that Kenita's going to get a little bit of justice here. We know we have our man.
Kenita's new girlfriend told detectives that she overheard Kenita and Gerard arguing the night before the murder. And Gerard's sister admitted that he sounded very strange over the phone shortly after the murder occurred.
However, back at the station where Gerard is questioned by detectives, he swears they have made a horrible mistake.
Look, I don't know what happened to Kenita. You killed her, Gerard. No, man, you got it all wrong.
We interviewed him for 6 hours, and it was the same thing over and over again. I didn't do it. We know you did it. I wasn't there. We know you were there.
Eventually, after several grueling hours, detectives succeed in wearing Gerard down.
We're running on fumes at this time.
All right. I was there, but I don't know what happened.
Gerard claims that on the night of February 19th, when Kenita returned home late, he was high on drugs and angry.
He was supposed to be on drugs, and he was like on PCP.
He admits to having a verbal argument with her, and he was upset that she was out, upset that she was dating a woman.
I like you messing with that female, you know that.
Just go to bed, Gerard. I'm not doing this.
I'm not doing it.
So you spent the night?
Yeah.
But Gerard says that when he woke up in the morning, the argument picked up where it left off.
He admits to physically assaulting her, that he had thrown Kenita across the room and struck her numerous times.
So when did you get the knife?
I don't know.
He indicated to us that he had blacked out.
Gerard claimed he was still high from the night before.
Could he have blacked out? Possibly. But I just don't believe he wanted to admit to himself what he did.
Most people don't want to admit to anything that they've done bad. Never mind something as heinous as killing the mother of your child.
Remember these pictures?
To refresh his memory, detectives confront Gerard with the autopsy results.
She was stabbed 30 times, Gerard. Come on.
We're trying to get him to just come around and tell us to take responsibility for it. He just won't. But his details were very clear leading up to it and very clear afterwards.
Slowly, Gerard begins to confess to the murder of Kenita Nicholas.
He told us that he, Kenita, and the 7-month-old child were the only people that were in the apartment at this time.
Gerard says it all stemmed from Kenita being unwilling to reconcile their breakup.
He didn't want to break up. He didn't want to be away from her. So that was the problem.
The argument started again, and then it just got out of hand.
He obtained a knife from the kitchen. He used that knife to stab her and slit her throat.
If he could have her, then nobody would.
Then he admitted to cleaning himself up and leaving.
When Gerard finishes making his statement, detectives book him on first-degree murder and then inform Kenita's family that her killer is in custody.
A hard job. It was very hard to think about.
Like, wow, is this reality? I was hurt. I just couldn't believe that he actually took her life.
How you do that in front of your kid? To his mom?
Gerard's arrest is made even more shocking by the revelation that he'd been abusing Kenita all along.
None of us in our family knew that she was going through this. You just didn't see it. If I knew
the seriousness of it, I would have done something to try to help.
As the case moves toward trial, all Kanita's family can do is pray for justice.
You should never see the day of light again. You should be punished.
But in the end, Gerard never goes to trial.
Gerard's attorneys approached prosecutors looking to cut a plea deal.
If he had chosen to go to trial, the minimum he would have been looking at is 60 years for murder. At that point, it became, you want to roll the dice, or would you rather plead to something less?
In March of 2017, Gerard pleads guilty to murder. In exchange for his plea, Gerard is sentenced to 35 years in prison.
He'll be 72 years old by the time he gets out.
It's extremely satisfying to know that not only does Kenita Nicholas's family get some justice, Gerard will not be able to hurt anybody else.
Will that ever be enough to make up for what Gerard took from those who loved Kenita?
I wish he had given more. I wanted that life.
I just wish that she was here with me.
I miss her, man. I miss her.
She'll be missed forever.
In their grief, Kenita's family also hopes her story could save someone else from suffering the same fate.
My baby didn't think he would go that far, and it did. That first shot, that's time to break it off. Go find family, go find friends, get away from that person. It's not worth your family losing you. It's not worth you losing your life.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.